As a parent, you have probably been told to reward your child's good behavior. Maybe a therapist said it directly. After all, there are so many devices, apps, and visual charts now for getting a reward for just about anything for your child. And maybe you have been using a reward system for years, but now your child is a teen and you're not quite sure if you're doing it right anymore. That might lead you to start thinking something like this: is this a reward, or am I just bribing them? And if I keep doing this, am I actually teaching my teen that they will only do the right thing if there is a prize like money attached to it? So you kind of feel stuck. And today I am reacting to a researcher who studies the teenage brain, and her work explains something most parents never get told about: how the teenage brain actually responds to reward. And as we watch this together, I am going to walk you through the real difference between a reward and a bribe, and how to set up a reward system the right way for you and your teen, so you're not stuck wondering if you are creating this vicious cycle where your teen needs to be paid to do just about anything. So let's dive in. Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Lee, a pediatric health psychologist and the founder of Teen FND Academy, a coaching program that helps teens with FND or functional neurological disorder and their parents get their lives back. So the researcher we're reacting today is Dr. Adriana Galvan, a neuroscientist at UCLA. Her research looks at how the teenage brain responds to a reward, which is the topic we're going to talk about. And a bit of a bias here, as a UCLA graduate myself, I feel somewhat closer to her, even though I don't know anything about her at all. And we probably didn't go to school at the same time, but that's okay. Let's get into what she has found.
Shape the way your brain ultimately develops. We also know that the brain matures and continues to do so past childhood and into the teenage years and well into your mid-20s. So most of you in this room today, as middle and high school students, don't yet have a fully mature brain. But this is actually really beneficial if we think about one of the functions of adolescence, which is to establish your independence from a caregiver. Because your brain as an adolescent is built to help you do that. Compared to children and adults, the teenage brain is really good at seeking out new experiences, enjoying thrills, and seeking out risks. It's also really good at recognizing social or being sensitive to social and emotional information. And so for that reason, the teenage brain is really responsive to rewards and emotions when making decisions. And in my laboratory at UCLA and laboratories all around the world, we're interested in uncovering that very question: how does the teenage brain make decisions? One of the first discoveries relevant to this topic was made when we discovered that the part of your brain in the very front, called the prefrontal cortex,
which is right here. Prefrontal cortex is right in front of your head. Okay.
The last brain region to develop, because your brain develops from the back to the front, continues to change up until the mid-20s. And the reason this is relevant is because the prefrontal cortex is a part of your brain that helps you think about the consequences or potential consequences of your actions before you do them. It helps you regulate your behavior and your emotions. And so it makes sense that if this part of the brain isn't fully available until well past adolescence, then teenagers may make more impulsive decisions with less regard for the potential future consequences. But we now know that the story is far more interesting and complicated than that.
Okay, a little bit of a side note here. The reason why your child seems to be impulsive, moody, or kind of changing the decisions, 20 times every minute, that is precisely because of the prefrontal cortex or the frontal lobe not being fully developed. And that's why a lot of parents actually ask me, is my child's behavior and moodiness because of the teenage thing, or is it like an FND thing? Because FND also is a miscommunication of the brain and body, and that causes the personality behavior changes along with other symptoms, right? So they're confused. And my answer is simply, almost always, well, regardless, it's a brain thing, and then partially it's a both. It's partially the teenage brain's not fully developed, and also partially it is the symptom that they're experiencing. And so rather than thinking about is it one or the other, for parents, it helps them understand better if they think it's probably a both thing. So what do we do with that? So let's talk about the reward system and the behavior change right now.
And in fact, What we really need to do is think about how brain regions that are not at the surface of your brain, but in the deeper layers, how they change. And one region we focus on is called the striatum. And the striatum is the key component of the reward system. So when you receive something that you find rewarding, your striatum is very responsive and it releases something called dopamine. And this is the case not just in humans, but in kids, in mice, in rats, in monkeys. All of these organisms respond really with a lot of excitement in their brain when they get something they like.
So, for example, maybe for you adult or parents who are watching this right now, what if you just open the door 2 minutes from now and then suddenly you find like, I don't know, a lot of cash right in front of you. Like you're like, oh my gosh, unbelievable. And then a huge dopamine, gets released inside your brain all the way onto, your brain-body system. So the part of this brain striatum, technically the name is so important for me because I'm like so geeking out, but otherwise you just need to know like, okay, there's a part of the brain that is like super activated and connected to this reward center, and that is what she's gonna talk about.
So in my lab, we study this reward system across development, and especially in teenagers. And we do that by asking people to come to the laboratory.
Okay, totally side note. It says that this video was published in 13 years ago. So that's why you see this equipment, MRI, a functional MRI, and just the vibe, it seems a little outdated. Like there's a telephone right next to this guy's computer, right next to each other. And I was just thinking, this is funny. But anyway, okay, keep going.
And perform what's called a functional magnetic resonance imaging scan, or fMRI. And the beauty of fMRI is that you can take a snapshot of the brain in motion. So while you are experiencing something you like, or while you are making a decision, we capture how your brain is responding to that, how your brain is active. And so to study the reward system, what we did is not simply show people pictures of reward, which is what mostly happens in brain imaging studies. But instead what we did is we actually gave someone a reward. And what's something that people find rewarding? Sugar. So what we did is...
She's not wasting her time. She is a real deal. She actually provided the sugar as a substance of the reward system, which is really interesting.
We asked people to come to the lab. We asked a group of teenagers and a group of adults. And while they were in the MRI, we hooked them up to a straw and we fed them squirts of sugar water every so often. And first we asked them whether they liked it. Maybe they weren't going to like the sugar as much as we thought, but they actually did. This is a rating scale asking them, how much do you like the sugar? And the average response is in red for the teenage group, and the adults is shown in white. And you can see that everybody liked it, but it's the teenage group who showed this exaggerated sensitivity. They really liked it.
A little bit of side note, this is not surprising because I work with teens all the time and they love something that is comforting for them. And many times it's something sweet. So whether in the form of cookies or, like baked goods or chocolate. And in my program, Teen FND Academy, we frequently use chocolate as a way to regulate their nervous system. So for those who are ever interested in, just drop me a comment, chocolate biofeedback, and I am happy to demonstrate what that looks like. But it's pretty cool.
So we started to wonder whether there was something neurobiological that represented this difference. So instead of focusing on the prefrontal cortex, which is what a lot of brain scientists who study adolescents do, we looked at the deeper layers of the brain. So in this image, which is actually a real human brain image averaged together among all our participants, we saw that in the deeper layers, here represented with this this yellow activation, the striatum was really excited to the sugar water. And this was across all age groups. But the really cool thing was observed when we looked at the differences between the teenagers and the adults. Here again, I'm showing you the magnitude of activation, that is how excitable the brain was in the teenagers compared to the adults, to this very simple reward of sugar.
Once again, a little bit of a side note here. If your child acts very almost like a hyperactive after taking sugar, I don't know if this is exactly related to that, but what I do know is that the sense of this I like it, the reward system, oh, and I like it, I am eating something equals the reward center getting activated. I would imagine that is related to it, but let's see what she had to say.
And you can see that the teenagers were much more excited to the same exact stimulus, And in the same exact region of the brain, it's the teenage brain that was going crazy. It was really excited to get it. And when we associated that with their ratings of the sugar, it was only in the teenage group where we saw that people who showed greater activation in the brain in response to the sugar also told us they liked it more. So that means that in real time, at the very moment your brain gets something that it likes, it will make you think that it's better. And you can think or imagine that in future circumstances, your brain will encode that information and remember that you liked it. So it will bias your decisions toward getting more rewards. And that's what happens during adolescence. But to ensure that this wasn't just specific to something as simple as sugar, we gave people something else that everybody likes. And we did this while they were in the MRI. And what's something else that everyone loves to get? Money, right? Money. Everybody likes money. So we brought in a whole separate group of teenagers and adults. And this time we threw in a group of kids in there who were between about 7 and 10. And we found that, again, the part of the brain that was most responsive was the striatum, shown here on the left. This is a brain scan showing the average activation. But what you can see really clearly is that not only were the teenagers more reactive to the money than the adults, which you might argue is because maybe they have less of it, they like it more, but that's not the case because the kids probably have even less than the teenagers, and the teens still showed this exaggerated response. So this is telling us that there's something really special about the teenage brain. There's a sharp increase in sensitivity to rewards and novel information from childhood to adolescence, but then there's a sharp decrease from adolescence to adulthood.
Okay, this is really fascinating. And I do have a hypothesis about money specifically. Kids' brain activation compared to teenagers was a little bit less than the teens, right? And so the thing about this is again my hypothesis, is that when the kids are young, they may not understand the importance and the actual value of the money, because what they're focusing more on is the actual thing that the money can buy. So whether it's a toy or, like food and chocolate, things like that. Whereas teenage, I think they're partially the brain development is helping them to understand the connection between what money can do with their reward system getting activated. So like, oh, if I have this money, I can go get a Starbucks, for example, right? If I have this money, I can buy new clothes. And if I have this money, I can buy more games and, stuff like that. So I think that is part of what might be going on. Again, this is like purely my hypothesis. There's not based on the science. Like logically speaking, that's kind of how I think. The Family Guy shares a handful of practical strategies to help you get out of this survival mode. And it shows why our structured approach gets such a strong result. Grab it from the description below. It is free. In an adult, the brain activation is lower. Couple of things I am thinking about. One is, well, there's so much money you can buy, right? And also the adult has more brain maturity, so they can find the connection and the consequences. And well, like a few $100s would be helpful for some, but not enough for other things that they might really like. So again, there's a lot more complex thing than that. What is really fascinating is that teenage years is a vital time for parents to start thinking about this reward system. So just to summarize, what she's basically showing you is that the teenage brain's reward center, the striatum, lights up more intensely than an adult when it experiences something rewarding, whether it's money or sugar, right? Not a little more, like noticeably more. And that response is strongest when the reward is something the teen actually finds meaningful, not something handed to them. And this is the part most parents never get told. So it is not just that teens respond to any reward. It is that the size of the response depends on whether the reward actually means something to them. So let's go back to the two things you were probably stuck on. Is this a reward or a bribe? Here is a difference between the two. A bribe is something you offer in the moment to stop a behavior that you have a hard time tolerating. So for example, your teen is acting out, melting down, emotional breakdown, whatever that is, and you offer money or something like, oh yeah, let's do this, let's go get ice cream or something to make it stop. And that is a bribe because it is reactive and it teaches the brain that the escalation gets resolved. You're also doing something to help you feel better, to move away from that situation. Now, A reward is different. A reward is tied to a goal your teen helped set ahead of the time, not in the heat of the moment. So maybe the goal is doing something like a regulation practice when they feel overwhelmed. And maybe it is following through on a piece of their treatment plan or something like that. Whatever it is, your teen had a hand in deciding, like they had a skin in the game, of what they were working towards and what they would earn for it. That is the difference. So this is more about you and I working together as a team to come up with the goal rather than you are telling your child what they need to be doing. So timing and ownership. A bribe is parent imposed, meaning like you're the one who is wanting to stop the thing in that moment. And then the reward is a teen involved, planned ahead, tied to something they are working on. Are you creating a kid who only does the right thing for money or a prize? I mean, you've seen it. The activation is pretty significant. And this is where her research actually matters most. The reward doesn't necessarily have to be a thing, like a material thing, or money for that matter. What activates the striatum is meaning associated with it, not the actual value. So the reward can be like a quality time with you, or having a little bit more of the decision-making power, for example, like choosing what the family does on a Saturday, or where to get the Uber Eats or something like that, or getting to stay up later on a specific night. So it could be more time on something, and it can be a privilege they can actually care about. And here is a practical part that I teach families all the time in my program, Teen FNE Academy. Number one, let your teen build their own reward list, wish list, whatever that is, not you deciding what you think is good for them. And when they give you that list, even if it looks a lot or unbelievably gigantic and unrealistic, your job is not to say, we can't do that, we can't afford it. No. Hold that thought. Your job is to say, wow, you have a lot of things you are interested in. I didn't know that. This is great. Let's figure out how you and I, we make some of these work. If you want to see how my full program of Teen FND Academy works and how it's helping families resolve FND for real, watch the video linked in the description box below. So your role as a parent is not to pick the reward. It is to set the parameters, budget, time, what is realistic. And if you are seeing your child having this gigantic thing, like, I don't know, your child's wanting to go to Disneyland for 2 weeks straight, right? And if you're like, oh my God, this is like out of budget, like we can't do that, you might be tempted to say, oh, there's no way we can do this. Instead of saying that, wow, this is a giant reward. So let's figure out how we can make this work. So this may not be something your child does one time to get the giant reward. The expectation and then the reward have to be pretty comparable and realistic and appropriate, right? So it doesn't have to be like 1-to-1. And sometimes a lot of teens who are wanting this kind of giant reward, they actually spend time working towards that. So they have to get a lot more points than what they would be getting for a piece of chocolate, for example. So you're not denying what they want. You're literally working with them to build that system. And that is what makes this system different from bribery. And this is why it does not create a money-dependent kid. Because even though on the surface your child might be getting money, but the reward is theirs. The ownership and the responsibility is also theirs. And according to her research, that ownership is exactly what makes the brain respond more so than anything else. So that is the science behind why ownership for the teens matters so much when it comes to reward. Not the size of the reward itself, not whether it costs money, but whether your teen actually had a hand in choosing it. So if you try this, even though on the surface you ended up giving your teen money, your mind starts to shift because the bribery feeling goes away because you're not negotiating in that moment anymore as a reactive response. You build the system together ahead of time so you feel prepared and you feel good about it. And this is one of many things that I work through with families inside TNFNA Academy how to build these systems in a way that actually supports the nervous system regulation, not just compliance. So you're not needing to micromanage and teens not feeling like they're being micromanaged. But I want to hear from you. What were you told about setting up a reward system for your teens specifically? Or are you doing it? Was it helpful? Or did it leave you just as stuck before? Drop in the comments because I read your comments all the time. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next video.